There's a moment in toxic relationships that almost no one warns you about. It's not when the lies begin, not when the insults start, not even when the manipulation becomes obvious. It's the moment you start getting better. Because strangely enough, that's often when things become the most dangerous. When you stop begging for approval, when you start setting boundaries, when you no longer react the way you used to. Instead of fading away, some people escalate, and not in loud, obvious ways, in quiet, psychological ones that can undo months, even years, of healing if you don't recognize what's happening. And the most unsettling part, it often doesn't look like cruelty at all. It can look like love, like nostalgia, like vulnerability, like someone who suddenly needs you. But underneath, the real goal is the same as it's always been: to pull you back into the role that served them. Let's unpack how this actually unfolds, step by step, so you can spot it before it pulls you under. Phase 1, the shock of losing control. When someone has grown used to influencing your emotions, decisions, or self-worth, your independence doesn't just surprise them, it destabilizes them. You're no longer predictable. You're no longer easy to sway. You don't react on cue anymore, and control thrives on predictability. At first, they may test the waters with subtle jabs. You've changed. You're not as fun as you used to be. Why are you so distant lately? On the surface, these sound like concern, but their real function is diagnostic. They're trying to see if the old buttons still work. If you rush to reassure them, apologize, or explain yourself excessively, they learn something crucial: the door is still open. But if you stay calm, grounded, unapologetic, they move to the next tactic. Phase 2, attacking your growth itself. Here's where things start to feel disorienting. The very traits you worked hard to build suddenly become the problem. Your boundaries become coldness. Your confidence becomes arrogance. Your independence becomes selfishness. Your calmness becomes detachment. Why? Because growth removes leverage. If guilt used to control you, they'll provoke guilt. If fear worked before, they'll stir fear. If approval kept you hooked, they'll threaten withdrawal. This phase often hurts more than the earlier abuse, because it targets your progress, not your weaknesses. And it plants a dangerous question in your mind. What if they're right? Self-doubt is the quickest way back into someone else's orbit. Phase 3, rewriting the past. If criticism doesn't pull you back, something softer appears. Memories. Suddenly, they're reminiscing about the good times. Remember when we used to talk all night? You were so happy back then. I miss the old you. Notice what's missing: accountability for what changed. The past gets edited into a highlight reel where the painful parts quietly disappear. You're invited to step back into that version of reality. Not because it was healthy, but because it was comfortable for them. And nostalgia is powerful. It bypasses logic and speaks directly to emotion. You don't just remember events. You remember how it felt to be wanted, chosen, important. But here's the hidden catch. They're not missing your authentic self. They're missing the version of you that didn't challenge them. Phase 4, the sudden crisis. If memory doesn't work, something else often appears. Something urgent. A problem. A setback. A breakdown. An emergency. The timing is rarely random. Just when you found stability, peace, clarity, they need you. Maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe something went wrong at work. Maybe they're struggling emotionally. Maybe they say you're the only one who understands. And if you're a compassionate person, this is the hardest stage to resist. Because now it's no longer about you. It's about helping someone in pain. But notice what happens next. The conversation shifts away from your boundaries. Your needs disappear from the equation. You're pulled back into caretaker mode, not through force, through empathy. Phase 5, the just this once trap. This is where many people relapse into old patterns. The request doesn't sound unreasonable. I know you need space, but just this once. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. Please, I don't have anyone else. It feels morally wrong to say no. But just this once isn't about one exception. It's a test of whether your boundaries are negotiable. If you bend even slightly, it signals something powerful. You can still be pulled back. And once that door opens, it rarely stops at one request. Why this works so well? None of these tactics rely on intimidation alone. They rely on your best qualities. Your empathy, your loyalty, your hope, your capacity to forgive, your desire to see the good in people. In other words, the traits that make you a strong human being are turned into leverage against you. That's why people often leave these interactions feeling confused rather than angry. Part of them wants to help. Part of them remembers the pain. Part of them wonders if they're overreacting. And confusion is the perfect environment for manipulation to grow. The hidden goal, restoring the old dynamic. It's not necessarily about hurting you. It's about restoring familiarity. In the old dynamic, roles were clear. You gave more. You explained more. You tolerated more. You adjusted more. Your growth disrupts that balance. And humans, even unhealthy ones, tend to resist losing a system that benefits them. What healthy concern looks like instead. It's important not to become cynical. Not everyone who reaches out during hardship is manipulative. Healthy concern respects your limits. A healthy person might say that, I understand if you can't help. Take care of yourself first. I don't want to pressure you. Pressure is the difference. Urgency that ignores your well-being isn't connection. It's extraction. The skill that protects you. Compassion without self-abandonment. You don't have to become cold to stay free. You can care about someone's pain without taking responsibility for fixing it. You can wish them well without reopening access to your life. You can acknowledge their struggle without sacrificing your stability. Think of it as emotional sovereignty. Your kindness belongs to you, not to whoever demands it most intensely. The real reason. Your strength triggers reactions. Your independence does something unsettling. It proves that change is possible. It shows that someone can grow instead of staying stuck. And sometimes that reflection is uncomfortable for people who aren't ready to face their own patterns. So they try to pull you back. Not necessarily out of malice, but out of resistance to that mirror. The moment you truly break free, freedom isn't when they stop trying. Freedom is when their attempts no longer scramble your sense of reality. When you can see the pattern instead of getting swept into it. When you pause before responding. When you check in with your own needs first. When guilt no longer overrides your intuition. That's when the dynamic loses its power. Because control requires participation. What most people get wrong. They think strength means never being affected. In reality, strength means noticing the pull and choosing differently anyway. You might still feel sympathy. You might still remember the good times. You might still care. But you no longer betray yourself to maintain the connection. A question that changes everything. When faced with a request, a crisis, or an emotional appeal, ask, if I say yes, will I feel stronger afterward or smaller? Your body usually knows the answer before your mind does. Relief feels expansive. Self-betrayal feels heavy. Why this stage is actually a sign of progress. Ironically, the most intense pullbacks often happen when you're closest to lasting change. Because the old system is losing its grip. Think of it like gravity. The farther a rocket travels from Earth, the more resistance it must overcome at the start. But once it breaks free, the pull weakens dramatically. The quiet power of staying the course. You don't need dramatic confrontations. You don't need speeches or explanations. Often the most powerful response is calm consistency, not reacting, not arguing, not justifying, not rescuing, just quietly holding your ground. Over time, the attempts either escalate briefly or fade when they stop producing results. The truth that sets people free. Someone else's crisis does not obligate you to abandon your own healing. Someone else's feelings are not proof of your responsibility. And someone needing you is not the same as someone valuing you. Real connection doesn't require you to shrink. The ending no one talks about. Eventually, one of two things happens. Either they adapt to the new version of you, or they drift toward people who will play the old role. Both outcomes are revealing, because they show whether the relationship was built on mutual respect or on imbalance. Final thought. Your growth isn't a betrayal of anyone, it's a return to yourself. And the moment you stop being easy to control isn't the start of loneliness. It's the beginning of real freedom. Not the loud, dramatic kind. The quiet kind where your peace no longer depends on someone else's approval, mood, or need for you. So if you find yourself facing sudden nostalgia, unexpected crises, or pressure disguised as vulnerability, pause before stepping back into old patterns. You don't have to harden your heart. You just have to remember that your life is not a rescue mission. And sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do, for both of you, is to let the old dynamic end. Because the right people won't fear your strength. They'll meet it.